So this is the equation of a circle that we're going to be using. So here, the first little question here asks you to write the equation of a circle with a center of -2, 1 and a radius of 3. So would you do that first, please? Okay, so let's see. If I use x minus a -2, so make that a +2 squared, plus y minus k, my k is a 1, because this is my hk, equals my radius squared, which is 3 squared, or I can just make that 9. So there's my equation of the circle. So the next question asks, does the point -4, 3 lie on the circle? So could you substitute those values in for x and y and determine either yes, it does lie on the circle, or no, it does not? Okay, let's see. So if we substitute the -4 in for the x and the 3 in for the y, we end up with that equation. So we would end up with, that would be -2 squared plus 2 squared. We're trying to see, does that really equal 9? So 4 plus 4 does not equal 9. So it is not on the circle. And then the last thing I'd like to do with this equation of a circle is graph it on a graphing utility. So if we look at this on a graphing utility, the first thing you'd have to do is, I thought I squared it there, is solve it for y. So to solve this equation for y, I need to move this whole thing over. So that would give me y minus 1 squared equals 9 minus x plus 2 quantity squared. Then since this is squared, I need to take the square root, so positive and negative. It's going to have a top and a bottom half to this equation of 9 minus x plus 2 squared. And then last I'm going to add over the 1. So my final equation is 1 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus x plus 2 squared. So we are ready to graph this equation. So I graphed these on my graphing utility, which is a TI calculator, and I showed you 2 possible windows here. This window makes the graph look like it should, like a nice circle. Using this second window, my circle actually looks like an ellipse. So you need to be very careful when choosing a window when you're trying to display a graph that you actually want to look like it should. So be careful when you're doing your windows. Having a standard window does not show you an appropriate graph. And down here, I just gave you a little hint. There's something called a friendly window. And that friendly window is -4.7, 4.7 by 1s. So on the x-axis, it goes from -4 7/10 to 4 7/10. In the y direction, it goes from -3 1/10 to +3 1/10 by 1s. Now this friendly window will ensure your graphs look like they should. But you can always take this friendly window and transform it. You can move it to the left or the right, which is what I did up here to make sure I could see the entire window. So I shifted these 2 values to the left 2, and I shifted these 2 values up 1, so I could see my entire circle. Another thing you can do is you can take a multiple of this window. So if you need a larger window, you could double the window, triple the window, Make it any multiple you want so that you can see an appropriate graph. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this equation, which happens to be a circle, and we're going to do something called completing the square so that we can put it back into the equation of a circle that we recognize. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared 4. And then after that, we're going to determine the x and the y intercepts. So to do that, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take each term and divide it by 4. So that I have my x squared and my y squared with coefficients of 1. Then, while I'm writing that down, I'm going to group my x terms together. I'm going to leave a little space. I'm going to group my y terms together. And I'm going to put the constant on the other side. So the rules with completing the square then is you take half of what's called the b number and square it. So half of negative 6 is negative 3, but squared gives me 9. So I'm going to add a 9 in here, but if I add a number to one side of the equation, I have to also add it to the other side. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the y terms. I'm going to take half of the negative 3, which is negative 3 halves, and square it, which gives me a positive 9 fourths. But if I add it to one side of the equation, I have to add it to the other side as well. So, I'm going to now take this part and factor it. And it turns out that when you factor that, it'll always be your x variable and your half number squared. And you can multiply that out just to make sure. If I have x minus 3 times x minus 3, I get x squared minus 3x minus 3x plus 9. So I do get my x squared minus 6x plus 9. So the same thing over here. If I factor that into a perfect square, it is y and the half number. And again, you can multiply that out to verify. So over here, if I add these together, I end up with 4. So I add those together, I get negative 24ths, which is negative 5, plus 9 is 4. So that tells me the center of my circle is at positive 3 and 3 halves. And the radius, that's my radius squared, so my radius is 2. So, I would like to now determine the x and the y intercepts. So to find the x-intercept, I'm going to put 0 in for the y. So if I do that, I'm going to get x minus 3 squared. So that's going to give me, plus 9 fourths equals 4. If I subtract over the 9 fourths, I have x minus 3 squared equals, so that would be 16 fourths minus my 9 fourths, which would give me 7 fourths. So then I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 7 over 2 by taking the top square root of the top and the bottom. And finally, x would equal 3 plus or minus the square root of 7 over 2. So this actually has 2 x-intercepts. If I go back and do the same thing by putting 0 in for the x to find the y-intercepts, I end up with this being 9, so when I subtract the 9 over, I end up with a negative 5, which I cannot take the square root of. So that tells me that there are no y-intercepts. And if I actually look at the graph, 3, that would be my center. A radius of 2 would go up to, down to, right to. This would be what my graph would look like. And it does not cross the y-axis. So we just verified that, but it does have the 2 locations it crosses the x-axis, which would be these 2 locations. And that's your lesson on completing the square and on symmetry.